Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. And the subject of this episode is Walter Matthau. Walter Matthau's one of my favourite actors of all time, even though I don't actually have that many films of his. He had a pretty long career. He acted into his 80s. He has, according to the Internet Movie Database, which is always right, he had 109 credits, but he actually did quite a lot of television, so there's not as many films as I originally thought. So I don't actually have a lot of his films, but the ones I do have are pretty damn good. It's kind of funny, I think he is still underrated as an actor. There's kind of pros and cons with his partnership with Jack Lemmon. They made 10 films together, 11 if you count JFK, even though they weren't in scenes together in JFK. Jack Lemmon even directed Matthau and Koch, which was Jack Lemmon's only film that he directed, which Matthau was nominated for an Oscar. So I think people have an idea of him as kind of partnered with Jack Lemmon, and as much as I love Jack Lemmon, I mean, I'll probably do an In the Frame episode of Jack Lemmon as well. Walter Matthau, I think, is overshadowed by Lemmon, but I think in some ways Matthau was better than Lemmon in some regards, and vice versa. I think Lemmon, in quite a lot of his films, especially the ones with Matthau, he borders on overacting a little bit, and kind of, in The Odd Couple, which I'll mention, he did lots of, physical things, and obviously, like, in the apartment, he had his nasal spray thing, or his nasal injector thing, that became a kind of shtick. And I think in a lot of the films with Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon kind of, I don't know whether he kind of felt the need or whether it was scripted to have these kind of physical tics, and kind of was a lot bigger in performance than Matthau. Walter Matthau's always kind of a little bit understated. So even though he's famous for having a rubbery face and famous for his expressions, as far as kind of physicality, I think he's quite an understated actor. He kind of lets other people do all the showy stuff. And I always kind of prefer actors that are kind of more grounded and kind of understated. Obviously I love Jack Lemmon, and don't get me wrong, but I think Matthau is kind of overshadowed, obviously just because the way he looks. He never kind of got the leading man roles. He was always kind of, early in his career, he was the heavy sometimes, and then he's kind of the sidekick or the friend. And again, not to mention Jack Lemmon again, but obviously in lots of Jack Lemmon films, he's almost the straight man at times. Later in his life, which is films that I don't have, bizarrely I don't have JFK, he did kind of the grumpy old men films with Jack Lemmon, the grumpier old men films, which strangely enough I don't have. He did Dennis the Menace, which I don't have. He played Albert Einstein in IQ with Tim Robbins, which I don't have. So let's just talk about the films that I do have. we'll start with Nicholas Ray's Bigger Than Life, one of Nicholas Ray's masterpieces with James Mason, about the side effects of drugs, or prescribed drugs. And Walter Matthau plays James Mason's colleague, kind of family friend. And again, it's a fairly thankless role, but again, Matthau deals with it with aplomb, but it's a fairly kind of straight role. He did a lot of television before Bigger Than Life, and then after Bigger Than Life he kept kind of going back to television, and his kind of film roles were kind of more sporadic, because like I say, out of the 109 kind of parts, I would actually say the majority of it is actually in television. So next is 1962, underrated as hell, kind of western, Lonely Are the Brave, or in the German media book Einsam sein die Tapferen, where Walter Matthau plays the sheriff that eventually goes on the trail of Kirk Douglas. It's a fantastic film. It's about the end of an era. Kirk Douglas is still on his horse, even though it's set in contemporary times. There's cars and trucks, but Kirk Douglas still has that old west mentality, of no boundaries and no fences, which obviously he comes to loggerheads with authority and the law. Walter Matthau, like I said, plays the sheriff who follows him and hunts him down, but he plays it in an interesting way. He plays it as he kind of not identifies with Kirk Douglas, but he sympathises with Kirk Douglas. He's not just blind to what's going on, which I suppose the character could have easily just been written as a straight up sheriff, but Walter Matthau brings that kind of humanity and that, not necessarily a quirky way of looking at it, but just a kind of more realistic way of looking at it. But again, early in his career, he's not in the film that much. He's in the film really in the last third, but he makes the most of his appearance, because that's the thing. Even when films, obviously in this case it's an excellent film, but even when he's not in films that are great, he's always watchable, and it means the film's always worth your time because Walter Matthau's in it. Maybe perhaps not grumpy and grumpiest old men. Next is Charade, the Hitchcock film that wasn't directed by Hitchcock. This is directed by Stanley Donen. This is a strange film because it's Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. It's a kind of light caper chase spy film, but some of the killings in it are really nasty, and it's a weird juxtaposition of this kind of light Audrey Hepburn, Cary Grant romantic thriller with savage murders in it. James Coburn's in it, George Kennedy, and Walter Matthau. Again, in this one he plays the heavy, or one of the heavies. But again, he does it with quiet assurance. He does it with a glint in his eye. And again, when he's on screen, he's excellent. But it's a weird film as far as tone, I find. I mean, it's a PG, but some of the deaths are really quite savage and nasty. It's really strange. So next is 1964 and Failsafe, or the other film that was based on Nuclear Disaster, obviously Kubrick's film, slightly more famous. But I'm glad that Criterion released this on Blu-ray, because it is a very good film. It's just because it's overshadowed by Kubrick's masterpiece. But this is really good, starring Henry Fonda as the president, and Walter Matthau is the kind of political, not spin doctor, but he's the kind of cold, calculating scientist who kind of predicts, how many deaths and things like that if a disaster strikes, and he gives a really chilling performance. Again, there's humour in it, but it's a kind of dark, biting humour. He doesn't pull any faces. It's a dark film, because unlike Doctor Strangelove, there's not many laughs in it. But the Criterion Collection edition, which is Spine 1011 for those keeping count at home, the restoration's beautiful. It's one of Sidney Lumet's. Well, it is underrated, but I think now it will get a bit more publicity and maybe come out a little bit from under the shadow of Doctor Strangelove. But it's a really good Walter Matthau part. Again, he's not the lead, but he is one of the more important figures in the film, and it's really good. Next is The Fortune Cookie by Billy Wilder. Again, Matthau would be in a few Billy Wilder films. This one's perhaps not one of Wilder's best, but it's still very, 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 very good. And he actually won an Oscar for this one, playing Whiplash Willie, a shyster lawyer. When Jack Lemmon gets an injury, he wants to play it up and get as much money out of everybody as much as possible. Again, Jack Lemmon playing Harry Hinkle does more of the physical stuff, whereas Walter Matthau is just wonderful and cynical, but again in a kind of understated way. Yes, he uses more of his face and his mannerisms and his expressions, but he kind of lets Jack Lemmon do all the physical slapstick stuff, and he won an Oscar for it. Make of that what you will, but that's a really good film. Next is one of the ones that probably broke him a little bit, but again, he was never like leading man material. He never kind of went on to, The Odd Couple, again with Jack Lemmon, Neil Simon's, based on Neil Simon's classic play. Walter Matthau's the messy, rude one. Jack Lemmon's the prissy, proper OCD one, and hilarity ensues. Again, it's not my it's not my favourite Lemmon and Matthau film, but it was inspirational, influential. It's been remade so many times. There's been so many sitcoms, even though perhaps not directly remade, but obviously inspired by The Odd Couple. Again, Neil Simon's great dialogue. Walter Matthau is fantastic as the slob. It's just a lot of fun. Next is a little gem that I wasn't familiar with until a few years ago, and that's A New Leaf, Elaine May's directorial debut. She also wrote it. This is an absolute blast. It's one of Eureka's best releases, and one that I would highly recommend picking up. Walter Matthau gives a fantastic performance as a millionaire playboy who's lost all his millions. So he's pretty much dirt poor, so he's desperately looking for a rich woman to cling on to and get all her money. And he kind of stumbles across Elaine May, who's a bumbling biologist who loves plants, and he inveigles his way into her life, gets married, and plans to kill her. And that's all I'll pretty much say about the plot for anybody that hasn't actually seen it. But it's an absolute treat. There's great dialogue. Again, Elaine May is the one doing the physical comedy in this one. And again, Walter Matthau is just brilliant. I mean, the gift Matthau had was, even when he was playing characters that were doing things that are morally dubious, you're still somehow on his side, because he is just such an engaging character, and he just has one of those faces that even if he's doing bad things, you're still rooting for him and you're still on his side. Whereas not a lot of actors can actually pull that off. There's always something quite endearing about him. Next is one of my personal favourites from 1973, Charlie Varick, on Indicator. This is one of the first indicators I got. This is just a great film. Again, it starts with a bank robbery. So Walter Matthau is a bank robber, but you're still on his side. As it turns out that him and Andy Robinson from Dirty Harry, it's actually a mafia fronted bank, so they've stolen mafia money, and there's obviously consequences. Joe Don Baker is hired to track them down, and he's just fantastic as this cold-blooded, vicious killer. Again, Walter Matthau's a bank robber, but again, you're completely on his side. The story is fantastic, the way it's written. You don't know what's going to happen next. It's just beautifully crafted. And Matthau, again, can be callous and determined, but likeable at the same time. And you're on his side, and you want him to get away with it. You want him to survive. Again, Matthau doesn't do a lot. He's still underplayed. Obviously, at this point, he had developed a kind of shtick of expressions and using his big rubbery face. But this is one of his best. And it's just one of the best films of the 70s. I would highly recommend Charlie Varick. And obviously, because I'm biased, I would highly recommend the Indicator release. So next is an odd film from 1973, The Laughing Policeman, with Bruce Dern and Lou Gossett Jr. Walter Matthau plays a cop. It's called The Laughing Policeman, but there's pretty much no comedy in it. It's about a mass murder of people on a bus, and one of them happens to be an ex-cop, Walter Matthau's ex-partner, and with the help of his new partner, he tries to find out what happened and why. It's a weird film. It's a bit of a mess. Matthau, this is bizarrely the one film where he's not really that likeable. He's a bit racist, a bit misogynistic, a bit callous, a bit nasty. And the film itself is a bit of a mess. It kind of doesn't really you get the feeling it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It's perhaps a kind of social commentary of the 70s in California, but it's an odd feeling film. Again, I maybe need to watch it a couple more times, but on first or second view, it's certainly not one of my favourites. But it does show you a different side of Matthau, when he can be actually quite nasty without that kind of gleam in his eye, without that almost cherubic little glint in his eye. So next up is arguably my favourite Walter Matthau film and one of my favourite films of all time, The Taking of Pelham 123 from 1974. This is just, it's one of those films that's just about perfect. It's got a brilliant idea, a subway train getting hijacked. No matter how many times you watch it, you still kind of forget how they're going to get away with it. So it continues to surprise you, even though I've probably seen it about 50 times, I don't know. A brilliant ensemble cast. Robert Shaw is just fantastic as the leader of the terrorists who are hostiging, is that even a word? Hostage-izing the train. Martin Balsam gives great support. Obviously the ending is famous, which takes advantage of Walter Matthau's big rubbery face. Please stay away from the terrible remake by Tony Scott with John Travolta. Yeah, Robert Shaw or John Travolta. Walter Matthau or Denzel Washington. At least you have to give the remake credit. They stayed away from the original ending because they just couldn't emulate the original ending. It is one of the greatest endings of all time. It's just an amazing ending. And again, it's another quintessential 70s film. It's actually, the scenes with the mayor are just wonderful, with Tony Roberts as his spin doctor, and that kind of gives you, it's a wonderful little satire on how cities work. It's one of those films that's just about perfect, and is on my top 150, top 100, whatever number of films, because it's a sensational film. If you've never seen it before, pick it up. It's really cheap on Region B Blu-ray. That's the Kino Lorber 40-year anniversary edition that I kind of had to double up on as well, just because I love the film so much. And Walter Matthau, it's a funny performance, but again, when he needs to be, he can be determined and assured and shows leadership, tells people to do their job, but again, there's humour in it, and you can kind of, because we go along with Garber, the character Walter Matthau plays, as he figures things out, we figure it out. It's just a fantastic film, directed by Joseph Sargent. Just an amazing film. So next is The Front Page, again with Jack Lemmon and again with Billy Wilder. Again, very good Billy Wilder film, not a great Billy Wilder film. It kind of just reminds you how amazing His Girl Friday is with Cary Grant. Because as good as Jack Lemmon, Walter Matthau, Billy Wilder, it's still not as good as His Girl Friday. But again, the script zings, perhaps not at the 300 miles an hour that His Girl Friday zings, but it's a really good script. Again, the two actors play off each other really well. The story of newspaper men who are desperately want to get the scoop about a guy who's going to go to death row or get hung. Sorry, there was no death row there. They just hung them. It's a fun film, but to be honest, as much as I love Jack Lemmon and Billy Wilder and Walter Matthau, if I'm going to watch that story, it's going to be His Girl Friday that I'm going to watch. Next is another personal favourite. One of my dad's favourite films as well, so I think part of that's transferred to me. It's Hopscotch, which is in the argument for the best Criterion artwork. This from 1980, directed by Ronald Neame, starring Walter Matthau, strangely enough. There's his big rubbery face. And Glenda Jackson, Sam Waterston, Ned Beatty is hilarious. Herbert Lom. It's a kind of light touch spy thriller about a CIA agent who's going to retire and write his memoirs, and obviously the CIA, led by his new boss Ned Beatty, doesn't like that idea. It's Criterion Spine number 163 for those of you counting at home. The artwork is just beautiful. It's a great story, beautifully told. Walter Matthau's love of music really comes through. It starts with a scene in a Bavarian beer festival, and Walter Matthau really didn't want to go to Germany because of World War II, and he was eventually persuaded by getting lots of concessions. It's just a beautiful film. Again, people might think it's kind of light fluff, but it's so well executed, so well acted, and for years when it was on British television, it must have been cut because Ned Beatty actually swears like a trooper in it. But growing up, I was never aware of it because it obviously must have been cut. But he drops F-bombs quite a lot in it. It's just so much fun. And again, as we see, because again, you're not really sure how it's going to end up and what Walter Matthau's character is up to next. But as it unfolds, it's just an absolute joy. Glenda Jackson's fantastic. Herbert Lom is the Russian counterpart of Ned Beatty, who wants Walter Matthau's secrets as well. It's just an absolute blast, and I would highly recommend it. Next is Buddy Buddy, Billy Wilder's last film. This is a remake of a French film starring Lino Ventura, which English translation's Pain in the Ass. Again, this is a good Billy Wilder film, nowhere near his best, but again, it's just fun. Walter Matthau's a hitman who books into a hotel to shoot a witness, and Jack Lemmon is a guy in the next room who's going to commit suicide because of his wife's infidelity. Klaus Kinski turns up as the sex expert that's been doing Jack Lemmon's wife. Again, Jack Lemmon gets to do the kind of physical comedy, and Walter Matthau is kind of really quite dark and really quite serious in the film as a killer, but obviously he still does his rubbery face. It's a really fun little film, but again, not to the quality of Billy Wilder's best stuff. But it's always watchable with Lemmon and Matthau. He then did Couch Trip, which I do have on Blu-ray, but I'm rearranging my A to Zs in my room, so I couldn't get my hands on it. Again, it's a little film with Dan Aykroyd about a radio therapist who needs a break, and Walter Matthau is one of his patients, and he ends up taking over his show. Again, it's a fun performance by Matthau. It's a good film, not a great film, but again, it's worth really having just for Walter Matthau, basically. And then the last one that I actually have is 1996, I'm Not Rappaport, where Walter Matthau teams up with Ossie Davis. I mean, what a partnership that could have been if they'd done more films together, because Ossie Davis is just awesome, and Walter Matthau is fantastic as always. And they are a couple of older gentlemen who meet on a park bench and get into adventures with drug dealers and other rapscallions. Again, it's not a great film, but it's a good film, and it's just an absolute joy seeing Ossie Davis and Walter Matthau act together, because they're both just fantastic. And like I said, Matthau did Dennis the Menace and the Grumpy Old Men films with Jack Lemmon, which I don't have, and he and Lemmon were in JFK in 1991, not sharing scenes. Again, I don't have JFK, but yeah, Walter Matthau I still think is underrated, slightly overshadowed by Jack Lemmon, but he deserves a big fat spotlight of his own, and that's why he was put in the frame. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you'll join me for more episodes of In the Frame. Leave comments below what your favourite Walter Matthau film is and what you think of him, or which one that I don't have that I should have. And hopefully we'll see you again for more videos. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying have a good day and farewell.